Hi, both of you. Thank you so much for joining me once again. It feels like yesterday that we were sat here doing the 2024 autumn budget, and here we are 12 months later talking again about what that means for dentists, their finances, and their business. How are you both?
Good, thank you. Nice to see you again, Gabby.
And you?
Yeah, really well, thank you, Gabby. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you so much once again. Really looking forward to this. I think a lot of what was spoken about and announced today has been trickled out over the last few weeks. So it'll be interesting to see your takes on it, what that's going to mean for our audience and what they can do to prepare, basically. I know there's some different dates there for some of the different policies to come into force. So it will have kind of a staggered effect, I think is fair to say. So first of all, I think it would be great to kick off with your first impressions of the announcements today.
So my first impressions, Gabby, are that a lot of the stuff that was leaked didn't actually happen. I think there was some things that were suggested that could happen that would have an implications, potentially serious implications to dentists and their financial planning. And a lot of it just disappeared. It just didn't happen. So I think there's something we can discuss that a bit more later around what didn't happen. But what did happen, and a couple of just key points to pull out just now for me, were the income tax thresholds remain frozen. Now that's been the case for a while, and the current income tax were due to be held until 2028. So that's been extended until 2031 now. So what does that mean? I guess what it would mean is they have this term fiscal drag that we've talked about before, Gabby, where it's the more you earn, so even just the smallest of pay rises, or as your income starts to grow or continues to grow over a period of time, more and more people are dragged into paying a higher rate of tax. First of all, in the first rate of tax, and then the higher rate of income tax. Because the threshold's remaining the same, it doesn't take long, therefore, for people to start creeping into the higher rate tax bracket. So although it's not technically a tax increase, over time, it definitely is. So over the next kind of 5 years, people will definitely be paying more tax than they would have done had they not frozen it.
Thank you for that. And what about you, Neil?
Yeah, it's a very, very similar message to Ian, that the fiscal drag is a stealth tax. And I think what gets a little bit hidden behind the headlines of no big changes is actually that there will probably be an income tax impact for dentists around dividend taxation, which we'll come on and we'll talk to in a little bit. But I think the other thing, when Ian talks about things not happening, the other thing we note from a dental perspective is that there's no good news for dentists around additional funding. So lots and lots of talk about increasing funding for healthcare, but the word dentistry not in there at one.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Actually, I think it's what wasn't said that speaks volumes, isn't it? In this instance, I think it would be good to kind of touch on those policies or announcements that were made that will have a significant impact on our audience. So I know we've spoken about income tax thresholds being frozen. Well, that's been an additional 3 years compared to what it was beforehand. What other standout announcements were made for our audience?
Well, probably the one that will grab the biggest headlines is the ISA changes, and it's caught a few people out as well. We didn't really see this one coming. It actually started to get leaked this morning. We started to get wind that something was going to change there, but it didn't change in the way that many of us were expecting. So what she's basically done is that there is now going to be, or from the next tax year, there's going to be a restriction of £12,000 per year for cash ISA investments. That was previously 20,000. You could put the full £20,000 in. Now it's going to be 12,000. You can still invest £20,000 in an ISA, but you can only put £12,000 into cash. And that's for everyone under the age of 65. For those over age 65, that's not the case. You can still have the full £20,000 in cash. So that was one of the things that, from a financial planning perspective, that we need to keep on top of, and we need to see how that we perhaps need to adjust people's planning when it comes to where to invest their money.
Thank you.
I think from my perspective, Gabby, one of the things that jumped out that will definitely impact some dentists is the policy that's been penned, the mansion tax. So an additional council tax charge for properties of more than £2 million in value, which starts at £2,500 but slides to £7,500 per year for properties worth £5 million or more. And when you hear the major news channels talking about this today, they're talking about it affecting about 100,000 UK homes. And you might think, okay, maybe wouldn't hit that many dentists because it's not that big a number. But I think when you think of dentists in London and the South East, you think of dentists in my neck of the woods, places like Harrogate and Ilkley, some of the nicer places around the lakes, and in Scotland, like North Berwick, there's definitely going to be dentists with houses that are impacted. And it's just another bill to find, unfortunately.
I can't remember, when did they say that's going to come into effect from it? Do you remember the date that was said for that one?
I'm sure it was next year.
Yeah. So again, sort of talking about those ISA changes that you mentioned there, Ian and Neil, the mansion tax, so to speak, it's quite imminent in comparison to some of the other announcements that were made, and that doesn't give dentists and dental professionals a lot of time to prepare for that. And £7,500 is not a small amount of money. It's quite significant. So we'll come on to kind of preparations, I guess, in a bit. I think it would be good to get your take on what do you feel generally is there anything here that will have a positive effect? So I think we've touched on a couple there, which have maybe, I mean, the ISA one would be good to go into a little bit more, actually. I think, encouraging investments is ultimately the goal here with that policy. I mean, what do you guys think about that? Do you think that's a positive?
Yeah, I think this is where we take a step back, Gabby, and have a look at the full picture in terms of where can you or where should you be investing money. One of the things that we believed for some time now that could have been under threat was changes to pensions. There was a suggestion that there was a potential threat to the amount of tax efficient savings you could invest into pensions. There was also a suggestion that the amount of tax-free cash you could withdraw from pensions was going to be restricted, and none of that happened. There has been in the previous budget, if you remember, there was the announcement that personal pension lump sums will form part of your estate when they're valuing your estate for inheritance tax purposes. That has gone through, so that will take effect from 2027. But there was no other changes to pensions from a savings perspective. So I think that's positive. So when we look at the ISAs, you've still got the opportunity to save in an ISA up to £20,000, and you can still save into pensions pretty much as you were. There is one caveat, which is for people who are paying pensions through salary sacrifice. There's going to be a restriction of up to £2,000, but there's not going to be many, if any, dentists that are going to be impacted by that. So on the whole, I think when we're looking ahead and thinking about where should dentists be saving money, I think the picture's still very similar. That there's not been a huge amount of change there, which is a good thing. The only other thing I wanted to add to that as well was it's a reminder for people to just be careful of acting on rumours. A couple of months we've been getting asked about, can I quickly take my money out? Can I do this? Can I do that? And making changes on the basis of speculation. And we kept saying, please wait until we get this for sure, make sure it happens. Let's not make any decisions based on speculation. And of course, when we get a day like today, when actually none of that happened, it turns out that was the right thing to do. So there is some comfort in that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
I think from my perspective, Gabby, there's two things that stand out as good news, and there's one really obvious one that I'll come to second, but just expanding on what Ian said about ISAs, Rachel Reeves talked specifically about looking at it as being good news for the UK PLC, the fact that we are a country who needs to have a growing economy. And she was talking with a number of providers with the hope of getting more British-based investment funds. And so having a bigger ISA allowance for investments based into Britain should be a really positive thing for the economy, which ultimately, if it's successful, hopefully takes the pressure off us all a little bit further down the line in terms of the need to take tax offers. So that could be a good thing. And Wesleyan for a long time has been a champion of getting investment returns from British-based firms. So it's right up our street, really, is that one. The obvious one that jumps out as good news is really for the young dentists, the dentists who are starting families or already have young families. It's the child benefit cap at 2 children being removed, which I think will make a lot of younger dentists with families probably feel very, very happy today with that news.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not a parent myself, so I can't put myself in the shoes of those people exactly, but I can imagine that, you know, it is significant for a lot of people when it comes to taking care of their children. So yeah, that's a really good point actually to shout about that one. And I think that leads me to another one that I guess is more general, which is the electric vehicles new mileage tax, which I don't think is coming in until 2028, but there will be probably quite a few people tuning in who fall into the category of owners of that. I mean, what does that look like exactly? Is that as scary as it sounds, or is it going to have an impact on those who own electric vehicles?
It's just another tax. It's as simple as that. I mean, it was announced at 3 pence per mile. For the annual mileage that you cover. So it's quite a simple calculation in terms of what mileage do you do, and it's 3 pence for every mile you do each year. It's just another tax. So depending on how often you use your electric car, that will obviously will determine how much you have to pay. So it's quite a simple one to work out. But yeah, it is a new tax. It is another tax that we didn't have previously.
Yeah.
For me, Gabby, I look at it and I've just literally gone electric. So it's a little bit of bad news for me. And I think, well, I do about 14,000 miles a year. So a real cost is about £420 a year. So it's not the end of the world, but it's not a bill that you want to have as an additional bill. And one of the interesting things with dentists is loads of people trading through limited companies have in the past 5 years bought electric cars through the limited companies or leased them at the very least. And so it's definitely going to impact a number of dentists as a little bit of an extra bill. And that, if you don't mind, Gabby, that gives me a little bit of a segue into limited companies and dentists. Do you mind if I go into that?
No, please do. Please do.
So we talked at the beginning about stealth taxes and the fact that income tax bands haven't risen. But obviously what they have announced is an increase by 2% in the dividend tax rate, the savings tax rate, and the tax rate for income from properties. Now, increasingly, I can't remember the last time I spoke to one of my very, very good dental accountant friends, and he said to me about 65% of his practice owners were now trading through limited companies. So a 2% increase on the tax chargeable to dividend income taken out of those limited companies is potentially something that's going to have them looking for an immediate advice. And that might not be initially from us as advisors, it might be initially from their accountants. But I would say that conversation needs to be something that's had in conjunction with their advisor, because where people are thinking maybe this is the point where I consider going back to being sole trader based or change structure, strategy, whatever it be, they should be thinking about some of the other options they can do to not necessarily have to draw wealth out of the business and incur those dividend charges.
Thank you. That's really insightful. I didn't have that on my list to talk about today. So I appreciate you putting that forward, Neil. Like you say, it's very applicable to a lot of people tuning in. I think that leaves me with unless there's anything else that you feel you want to talk about, kind of the final point, which is, how do people prepare? What can people do right now to take action? Is there anything here that needs emergency attention?
I think that there's one other thing that we haven't quite touched upon, which was it may or may not affect dental practices, but I think it's part of a picture around employing staff, running a practice, the additional burden that it just feels like. I mean, there was a national insurance increase last year from employers. There is now an increase to the national minimum wage and the national living wage. That can add an additional burden to those that applies to. because obviously that has to come from the employer. So the overall message around it, it doesn't look like there's any additional funding for dentists, certainly not from what we can see. Now, remember, there is a caveat that we haven't gone through the books yet with a fine tooth comb. That sometimes the devil's in the detail with some of this stuff. But at the moment, we can't find anything that suggests there's any additional funding for dentistry. But for employers and for dentists, there's still cost of living challenges. So planning for your future has never been more important. You really do have to take into account what your future might look like. Don't plan for what you think might happen from a budget perspective, because we just don't know what the next budget will bring. We can't anticipate what might happen to pensions, etc. We just go on what we know just now. So I think what this budget has helped to highlight is the importance of continuing to review, continuing to just keep pace with what it is you're trying to do, where you're trying to go, what your life you want your life to look like in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, what the exit strategies are. It's always a huge risk. In fact, it would just be really, really difficult to maintain it. If you made some plans at 30 and then left it until 60 and then hoped that it all kind of fell into place, that would be a huge mistake. So we would definitely encourage people just to continue to stay on top of your finances, keep checking in with your advisors, just make sure you're making good decisions, and the decisions that you're making just now suit you and your future, because the decisions that you took 5 years ago might not apply now. So just don't act on speculation. Don't act on what you think may happen in the future from a budget perspective. Just continue to review your finances, continue to review your savings and pensions and exit strategies. Stay on top of it, and just try and make the best decisions you can.
I think before we move on to you, Neil, I think what's really necessary to say then, I'm glad you did, Ian, is that ultimately, you can't plan for something that you don't know yet. So whilst there might be an element of panic around people, particularly those at particular parts of their life, we can only deal with what's in front of us. And I think that's also necessary to take on, because you have people across the spectrum. There'll be people who maybe don't think enough about these sort of things, and those that maybe think a little bit excessively too. So I think that kind of plan, but don't panic about what hasn't been said or hasn't happened yet is a really good takeaway message. So thank you for that. Neil, I'm not sure if there's anything you want to add to what Ian said there.
Yeah, I would just kind of pick up on the theme of things not changing again, and bring back something from a prior budget, that there was a little bit of uncertainty as to whether it would be pulled, whether it would be changed, what would happen with it. But we now have this greater certainty that for those dentists who are nearing retirement or have retired, is that their pensions are likely to fall into their estates for inheritance tax planning. And it's really important as you approach or start retirement that the strategy that you build thinks about what you're going to need through your retirement, what you want it to look like, what you're going to spend your time doing. It involves some kinds of really thought through expenditure plan that includes the fact that you might travel more, you might do more things, you might have more leisure time that sees you spend more than you would normally spend. And start to build a strategy that considers whether there's enough in the pot, but also whether there's too much in the pot. If there being too much in the pot means that they need to start to think about what they do at this point to make sure that they do things to support the next generation. And if we look at the budget, the theme of the budget kind of a little bit is around supporting the younger generations with the changes in minimum wages for younger people and the minimum living wage. And you look at some of those things, and a lot of those things are designed to support younger people. And it is tough out there for people at the beginning of their careers. So it's an important thing that generation that are retiring or have retired should be thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, thank you so much. Absolute pleasure as always to have you on. Some real insights there. And we'll make sure that we plug this video in our article on dentistry.co.uk so that people can come back and revisit this if they didn't manage even to tune in live today. So thank you once again, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Gabby.
Thank you, Gabby.